picked up that I love Palm Sunday. So anyway, before I went to seminary, I used to volunteer at Fairfax Hospital as a chaplain. And so this is before I went to seminary, and so I had this very idealized version of what I would do when I got there, at least initially. So I thought that people would want a chaplain to come and pray with them and visit with them. And I guess I also didn't realize the awkwardness of the system. So the way it worked was I would show up on the day that I was volunteering, and I would pick up the Lutheran list. And those were all the people that had, when they checked in, under religious affiliation, checked Lutheran. So I would get my list, and then I would go and I would make cold calls, which is very uncomfortable. Because it's very hard to walk into a hospital room where someone has been diagnosed with a terminal illness, or just had invasive surgery, or is awaiting test results, or whatever myriad of other reasons they might be there. And even though I believed in it, it was never easy. So I developed a system which would make the pain easier to take. A way to sort of erase the fact that I couldn't fix anything, and I usually felt very, very small in the midst of all that suffering. So I would visit the heart patients, and I would visit the oncology patients, and I would visit the ICU, and I would go to all the messy stuff first. And then I would go to the maternity floor. As many of you have noticed, I'm a little bit of a baby hog, and so I would go and I would visit the new moms and dads and all their little babies. And the hallway on the maternity floor is very, very different than the hallway of the oncology floor. The nurses are happier, and they seem to have the spring in their step, and the patients are all overjoyed with permanent smiles on their faces. And the babies, sing their little cooing song, and they smell so sweet. It just doesn't smell like anything like the rest of the hospital does. And even the paint colors and the lighting are better on the maternity floor. So I would end my day there, in that hallway, the place where happiness was found. And then one day, at the end of my rounds, I went into a room off this brightly painted hallway with the happy nurses bustling back and forth, and it wasn't a happy room. It was a room full of worry and sadness. And in the room lay a woman, a very pregnant, single woman who was crying. And I was caught completely off guard. And I hardly knew what to say. And I would like to be able to say that I did everything right that day. That I sat with her, and that she wanted to pray with me, and that she felt better when I left. I wish I could say that some of her burden had been relieved. But I can't. I can't even tell you exactly why she was in the hospital. I know none of her story. Because see, once I was in there, I couldn't just turn around and leave. So I told her who I was, and she just looked at me with these dead eyes and said, "Can you leave? I'm not interested." And so I left. And I stood in the cheery hallway that I had walked 5 minutes earlier. 5 minutes earlier, I'd been in a room off that very same hallway, which was filled with joy and celebration. And I'd walked straight into a room filled with worry and crushing sadness. Somehow, I had been able to sequester weeping and celebration to different wings of the hospital. And on that day, I saw that the very same path and even the very same experience can hold very, very different outcomes. Life is this way. We live off hallways and off paths and off parade routes, which are lined with suffering and joy. are lined with elation and grief, lined with laughter and weeping. And yet we so much want to secure ourselves in room 706B with the newborn baby boy. And we so much want the baby boy to grow up to be someone who will make the city proud and will be the crowning king. We so much want to prance down the road waving palm fronds and lying garments before this boy's feet. We so much want Jesus to be this type of happy boy. We want a God that will come and dance with us and bring joy and give us reason to celebrate. And even if we've grown up and left parade routes behind, we still want magic. And we still want the splendor of the dream and the promise of parade. This is the type of parade we want. This is the type of life we want. At a parade, no one wants to think about crying or weeping, or especially about dying. Those types of things don't belong on a parade route, just like they don't belong on maternity-floored hallways. But Jesus apparently wasn't clued in on parade route etiquette, because Jesus does what nobody else does at the parade. He cries, and he weeps. And I wonder if, as Jesus entered the city, if the tears which streaked his face were seen by anyone besides God. I wonder if anyone saw what kind of God this was. Because I suspect not. I suspect they looked away from the weeping Jesus, just as we do. Because thinking about it too much would scare the crap out of us. For when we do notice the tears, when on Good Friday we do hear his plea of, "Father, Father, why have you forsaken me?" we think that Jesus weeps for himself. But here at the edge of his precious city, he pauses and he looks down over all the fanfare and all the hoopla. And he gazes at his beloved people with all their hopes and their dreams, and he weeps. And yet the grief is very different. We weep for loss, and we weep for pain, and we weep for the loss of the parade hoopla. We weep for ourselves because we do not get what we want. And Jesus weeps not for himself, but for us. He weeps for our loss, and Jesus weeps for our pain. And Jesus weeps for the fact that there is a parade. Because whether we walk the route with him or we run in the other direction, Jesus knows that the route to life and the way to peace and the path of love is lined not only with delight, but also with tears. Jesus knows that the God that we want is not the God we're going to get. Because for as much as this parade is a parade for Jesus, in some ways throwing a parade for a man who is about to die means that we still don't get it. Means that we still don't understand who Jesus is. Because if we did, we would be weeping right alongside of him. If we did, we would be weeping for Jesus, and we would be weeping for ourselves. And I imagine that the deep pain within his heart as he saw the garments laid before him. I imagine that the words he wanted to say to them one last time, to those people who were expecting him to bring peace and love. I expect he'd say, "If only you knew what makes for true peace and how painful love can be." Because he knows that even with and through and following the Savior of the universe, life is much more holy than a parade. Sometimes we wonder things and say things like, well, he could have gotten off the cross. He could have turned around. He could have done this in so many other ways. He could have stopped and said to all those people lying their garments on the ground, "Stop. No, you don't understand and you don't know what you're doing." But he doesn't say that. At least not yet. Right now, he allows them. And he allows us to lay our garments at the feet and line the parade route. It's almost unbeknown to themselves, they give him what they can in that moment. They took their tunics that they wore as they tended fields, and they took the cloths that they swaddled their babies in, and they took their robes that they protected themselves from the weather, and they put them on the ground. Pieces and places of themselves that held their hopes and their fears. In that moment, as they stuck to the bottom of his sandals and to the hooves of the donkey, Jesus carried them to the cross with him. I don't know if he kept on weeping the whole way, but I do know that Jesus didn't march a parade that day. I do know that Jesus walked a hallway. A hallway much like that hospital one. Because we live in the hallways, don't we? Praise be to God that Jesus does also. And so now in this moment, what is given or what is laid, if anything, before Jesus? You know, we made this carpet, and we had fun with the glue and the beads, with the paints and the feathers, and we had fun thinking about what we would put on it to say something about ourselves. But you know as well as I do that that's not all that's there. They're strewn out for all to see, yet camouflaged under color and decoration, under makeup and music, lie the much deeper hues of the fabric of life. Because there on the ground before God and all humanity, we lay ourselves. Because those squares are you and they are me. And there are also blank squares. Ones that haven't been decorated. Ones that could be anyone. Ones that could be people who just can't bear to lay themselves before Jesus. Which on any given day could be any of us. Or those blank ones could be stories not yet written, ones that only Jesus knows. A blank square for the woman who sat alone behind a door off a cheery hospital floor. Because it is in this moment that Jesus carries us and every single person to the cross with him. Today and every day. We too are carried on the sole of the sandal and in the heart of the Savior. Because it is out of his great love for us that he doesn't stop at the edge of the city. For it is not our garments which line Jesus' way. It is our lives which determine his path. He may pause in Jerusalem, but he keeps going because the journey isn't really ever over. It never is. For where he goes, and where we cry, he cries. And where we laugh, so too does Jesus. Holy, holy laughter, and holy, holy tears. Off holy, holy hallways. Just much, much more honest than a parade. So, dear Jesus, this year we do sing loudly for who you are. But we also weep unabashedly for what you do. And so all the people sang, Hosanna, Lord save us.